In the sport of boxing, Canelo Alvarez's path has always looked a bit cloudy, yet fuzzy and uncertain. He has been a multiple-time world champion, but now on the cusp of becoming an undisputed champion at middleweight. There are questions yet to be resolved, and Caleb Plant may hold all of the cards for the answers for Canelo's future. Here, we'll talk about it. With the record of 56-1 with 2 draws, 38 KOs, Saul Canelo Alvarez presents one heck of a picture in the sport of boxing and has done so for years, from junior middleweight all the way up to light heavyweight. He has picked his spots and found himself to be an anchor in the sport where there has been opportunity. This fighter has been very diligent in chasing history. From October of 2005, when he began his career with a 4th-round TKO over Abraham Gonzalez, Saul Canelo Alvarez has stepped forward in the sport, primarily being a super welterweight, junior middleweight fighter who campaigned quite heavily at 155 pounds, just a pound above the 154-pound mark, but this was done tactically, and it worked for him very well. He had come along at a time in the sport where the Latin fan base really needed another hero to get behind, as veterans Marco Antonio Barrera, Eric Morales, and definitely Julio Cesar Chavez, their careers were all and had come to an end. And even Oscar de la Hoya, who was not very fan-friendly, found himself on the outskirts. But this story of Canelo and his path toward Caleb Plant, who holds the IBF middleweight title currently, this is a tale of how this fight could come together, who is in charge, and who is running things in this division. It may easily be said to be Canelo, but I beg to differ, because you have to look at how he has chased titles in the past. I recall his unanimous decision over Sugar Shane Mosley in May of 2012, where Canelo then was angling toward a shot at Floyd Mayweather Jr. After victories over Josecito Lopez and Alston Trout, with the Trout victory coming into question because though he got the unanimous decision, the fight was a lot closer, and many thought that Canelo could have possibly even lost that fight. He lost a majority decision to Floyd Mayweather in September of 2013, where you could see Mayweather, who was on the downside of his prime and getting closer to retirement, he still had enough in the tank to take on the likes of Canelo Alvarez, where he exploited Canelo's lack of footwork and could stay ahead of him boxing-wise. But Canelo came away from that fight learning something that was very significant of how the rest of his career has played out. Just as Floyd has picked opponents to have him look his optimum, Canelo began to adopt that formula for himself, and he has made quite the living doing so, with victories like the split decision over Erisande Lara in July of 2014, and then a scintillating knockout against James Kirkland. Canelo was now back at the top of the sport and began to look for other names in the sport that he can gain victory as well as luster. So in November of 2015, he had a unanimous decision over Miguel Cotto. That was for a vacant WBC middleweight title. Canelo was back in the game. You see, becoming undisputed at middleweight has always been in his mind. It's been an objective. But there have been roadblocks because of certain type of opponents who have been around the middleweight division. You take the Charlo brothers into consideration, you take Demetrius Andrade in consideration. These fighters could emulate the style that Mayweather had, which gave Canelo trouble. So he wasn't necessarily chomping at the bit to get to those guys. So what he managed to do is, in September of 2017, he finally faced Gennady Golovkin, Triple G. And that was for the WBC, the WBA, and the IBF titles, with also the IBO title on the line. Between these two gentlemen, they fought to a draw. Many people felt like Canelo won this fight. But this is the thing, Golovkin was the one that they were touting as the one who could replace Bernard Hopkins as the modern middleweight. And then there were echoes of him being as good as Marvin Hagler, Golovkin, which was not necessarily true, but it was a hype machine by certain networks that got behind him, that tried to showcase him as a fighter to be reckoned with. Canelo's skill set was more than enough for Golovkin, who had also dodged quality opposition at that weight class. They decided to have a rematch in September of 2018, where Canelo came away with a majority decision. This time, after being challenged in that fight, he was asked by Golovkin going in, "Why don't you fight me Mexican style?" So Canelo stood in the pocket, traded shots, outscored and outlanded Golovkin. But there was something strange about this. Golovkin wanted a third match. You see, he made tremendous paydays fighting Canelo because the audience loved that fighter. They loved to come out and see him go to work. And Golovkin realized something about Canelo. He wasn't a legitimate middleweight with size and power. So he could fight this man 100 times and never worry about being knocked out. And he knew he wouldn't have to chase him athletic-wise. But Canelo was a lot smarter than that. He defeated Golovkin and walked away from that, vowing to not give him another shot. That's when he decided to set his sights on the higher weights, where he went on to take on Rocky Fielding. And Fielding, at 167 pounds, these guys fought for a WBA super middleweight title. And though he had Fielding down once in round 1 and twice in round 3, Canelo wasn't given much consideration for this fight because of the opposition. But then he had the opportunity against Danny Jacobs. Jacobs was one whose name from the middleweight division could give Canelo a little life again. So he won a unanimous decision over him. And listen, Canelo from that fight alone was given a lot of consideration. Jacobs fought lackluster, never fought as if he had something on the line or something to shoot for. He was just happy to be invited to the party, and I think he was very happy with the payday that he was able to receive from this match. I didn't like his performance in that fight. I was very critical of him because this was an opportunity for Jacobs to really step up and put his name back at the top of the sport. But he was willing to do no more than be a dance partner for Canelo Alvarez. Which leads me back to Caleb Plant. After his victory recently over Billy Joe Saunders, Canelo realized the opportunity for middleweight undisputed was right within his grasp. Caleb Plant being the guy who had the final title belt. But the thing about Caleb Plant is he's a fighter who can box very well. He has great lateral movement, decent hand speed, doesn't necessarily have real knockout power, but enough to respect him. He's taller than Canelo, has a longer reach, and definitely has the type of style that has presented Canelo with problems in the past. But he is unwilling to take a certain amount of money for the opportunity. He is unwilling to put himself in a situation where Canelo may have advantages as far as training camp length and things of that nature. That's a smart thing, because if you're going to fight for all of the marbles, you want all of the cards on the table. And that's why I respect Plant's position in this, because Canelo, if you want it all, you have to put something on the line. And if you're not willing to do that, then a fighter who understands what the risk involved shouldn't try to put it on the line for you. Very smart move by Caleb Plant, which brings us who's calling the shots. Plant holds all the trumps. If Canelo really wants to become undisputed at middleweight, he has to concede something. Remember, he took Floyd's old formula and is trying to utilize it for himself, where he dictates everything and people kowtow to what he wants and what his demands are. But that may not work in this situation, because Caleb Plant has had an opportunity to sit back and assess things. The victory that he had over Billy Joe Saunders just proved one thing about Saunders more than it proved about Canelo. And Saunders was giving Canelo some issues, but he quit. Caleb Plant will not quit, but he wants to be compensated. And you have to respect that. It's for all the marbles, as I said again. And once before, when the opportunity was there for Canelo to receive all the marbles, he walked away from that and moved up, because the risk was just not worth it at that time for he and the opponent, Andre, and also Charlo, who were there. Those men would have presented a greater challenge. And as I said, they could mirror what Floyd was able to do as far as causing problems for Canelo at the time. So here we are. Will Caleb give in and submit and just roll the dice? I don't think he should, but after negotiating, there should come to some sort of agreement. This is a tremendous opportunity for Sweet Hands. Just think of it. If he were to be the one to topple Canelo Alvarez at this time, it would be a tremendous point for him in history, for his own legacy. And don't allow yourself, Sweet Hands, to not get this opportunity by asking for too much. Ask for it fairly, and then get in the ring and go about your work. The opportunity of a lifetime is here. You have the ability, you have the youth, you have the style that can make for an interesting fight against Canelo Alvarez. And for Canelo, don't move up again. Don't go seek out those light heavyweights who you think are too slow to catch up to you. Give a middleweight champion who deserves the opportunity, the real opportunity. We saw what you were doing with Billy Joe Saunders, and the way that that fight ended, it said more about Saunders than it did about you. We all felt that there was something about Saunders that just wasn't right, and then when the opportunity for him to step up into the limelight, he ran away backstage, cowering behind a hurt eye. But this time, all eyes will be on you and Caleb Plant. Embrace the opportunity, look forward to facing a real challenge once again, like you did years ago with Mayweather. These are my thoughts about this. Let me know what you think. This is Stormy B-Man. Shout out to the LDBC, the Lions Den boxing community, and Liberated Perspective, a third eye view of the world. For more content such as this, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. Peace to everyone out there, and please, everyone, remain safe.